Good evening. Welcome to the big story. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Pauline Berzosa.
I'm Shawn Yao.
Tonight's big stories. President Marcos does a walkthrough of towns in Batangas that were buried by landslides and insists there were flood control projects in place. They were just overwhelmed.
And the House asked the DOJ to put 7 officials under Vice President Sara Duterte's office under an immigration lookout bulletin in relation to the investigation over her alleged misuse of public funds.
And the armed forces is pressing China to pay the 60 million pesos in damages that the Philippines incurred in the June 17 Ayungin Shoal clash. AFP Chief General Romeo Browner Jr. says he has filed a formal request with the DFA.
Well, today is the National Day of Mourning for the victims and survivors of severe tropical storm Christine.
From October 21 to 25, intense rains inundated communities and killed more than 150 individuals. And today, President Bongbong Marcos saw for himself what's left of a village in Batangas that was buried in landslides.
The president said there were flood control projects in place na overwhelmed lang, and that he is amenable for the Senate to investigate this. Maricel Halili has the big story tonight.
This is ground zero in Dalisay, Batangas, a sleepy lakeside town ravaged by landslides that killed at least 20 people. Aside from prayers and mass, he offered the dead. President Bongbong Marcos also laid down some plans to protect the living from future catastrophes. One is a thorough review of the country's calamity response to be led by the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council or NDRRMC.
Layunin natin na hindi na maulit ang pagkawala ng buhay dahil sa kalamidad. Totoo na mas matindi ang mga bagyo ngayon. Mas malawak, mas malakas, mas mabilis ang pagbabago.
Marcos also visited Laurel, Batangas, where he said he has no issues with the proposal to investigate his government's flood control program. It was Senate President Cheese Escudero who said last week the upper chamber will probe the projects during deliberations on the national budget this month. Senator Amy Marcos also wants a full accounting of the budget given to the flood control program of Bicol, which bore the brunt of Christine. But the president also insisted the lack of infrastructure wasn't entirely to blame.
Maraming nagsasabi, nababasa ko sa dyaryo, nababasa ko, naririnig ko sa radyo, television, nasa na mga flood control. Nandyan ang mga flood control na overwhelmed lang. May flood control tayo, hindi kaya. Hindi talaga kaya dahil sa buong kasaysayan ng Pilipinas, wala pang ganito. Ngayon lang natin haharapin ito.
PBBM added that intense flooding isn't unique to the Philippines and that other countries are also now experiencing it due to climate change.
Dapat maunawaan talaga ng tao, hindi lamang yung budget, hindi kung ano yung science. What's the science? Follow the science. See what's happening. Tignan ninyo, hindi lamang dito. Nakita nyo ba yung nangyari sa Espanya? Nakita nyo ba yung mga nangyayari sa iba't ibang lugar? Sa States, yung mga nangyayari. Ganyan din. Doon din sa mga lugar na yun. Ngayon lang nangyari yan. Kaya gagawin natin, babaguhin natin ang mga design, patitibayan natin yung mga infrastructure, mga flood control, yung mga slope protection, pati yung mga tulay.
He cited Typhoon Ondoy back in 2009, which dumped a month's worth of rain in just 6 hours. Severe tropical storm Christine brought rains double that amount in just 5 days, according to Marcos. When asked whether he was satisfied with his government's response to Christine and Super Typhoon Leon, Marcos had this to say.
I'll tell you the truth. It's never enough. It's never enough. I wish we could do more.
It's never enough, but Marcos says his administration is doing the best it can with the resources it has. For now, cash and other aid were provided to victims and survivors, including the 60 million pesos given to Batangas by the Office of the President. Construction materials were also given to residents and local government so they can start rebuilding. Christine and Leon together are estimated to have affected more than 2 million families. For News 5, Maricel Halili, We Are One News.
Since he brought up the floods in Spain, I want to take a moment to show you what happened when Spain's king, Spanish King Felipe VI, and his queen did a walkthrough of the flood-hit Valencia region today. pelted with mud and other objects and shoes and all the other things. As you can see, the residents are clearly very angry. There's a lot of anger over what they perceive as a lack of planning from the government's part and a lack of, early warning, assistance. You can see the king there. He's a tall, bearded guy talking to some of the residents. At this point, there's been more than 200 people who have died from the landslides, from the floods, and rescue workers are still digging through the debris to try to find more survivors. Hopefully, there's. Like I said, what people see as there's anger over what people see as insufficient support for this calamity from the authorities.
Actually, Reg, just to put more context, in case people missed the different versions of this video that was going around social media, again, he arrived with the Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister was also pelted, you're right.
And a lot of people are saying they were actually wanting to pelt the Prime Minister, except the king, maybe he was tall, he was in the way. So he did get some mud on him, but the Prime Minister, notably, did not stick around. While he was still a bit clean, he managed to get into his government car and run away, and people were really not happy. Eventually, the king, Felipe, and Queen Leticia, they started talking to the people, giving hugs even when people were really angry.
That's right.
And you could see them crying and really being one with the people.
The thing that the people are shouting some of them are translated to in English is murder and shame. So you can see people are furious. Two things about this that stood out to me. Number one, government officials here are lucky that Filipinos are not that aggressive, huh? Like, imagine.
You don't see people in evacuation centers pelting them with anything.
No, not at all. People
in fact,
are
taking
still,
selfies, right?
People are still happy. People are still, nice and, respectful of the government officials who come to visit them at the evacuation centers. Remember that video of Congressman Villafuerte handing the cash to the old woman. She was all smile still, even though her whole house is inundated, right? So I just want to point out the stark contrast here. Like, government officials here are lucky that Filipinos are still always happy, always nice, and it unfortunately does come back to the point about resilience, right? There's this is part of the whole
this resilience though is a bit abused in my opinion.
Exactly.
We always say Filipinos are resilient.
We need to stop romanticizing resilience now, right? So maybe a little bit of anger could push us in the right direction. And the other thing that stood out to me was, as you said, the Spanish king. Eventually, they just took it. They didn't hide. They didn't run away.
It was very Game of Thrones. He was just walking and he was getting hit by mud on his face.
They took it. They kept walking, and eventually, as you said, they began embracing some of the residents, talking to them, and that's, I think, shows real leadership.
Well, actually, even after that incident, King Felipe came out with a video statement saying he understands the anger and the frustration of the people. And there were a lot of course, questions on accountability since, like you mentioned, Regina, earlier, right? A lot of their anger stems from the late response. They were even shouting, "You're 4 days too late. It took you 4 days to arrive and help us." So
and just really ill-timed warnings. They gave the warnings out at 8 p.m. when everyone was still out and about because they do siestas over there, and they did not announce during siesta. In which case, but again, a lot of learning points from that. But unfortunately, still on the weather, there is a new tropical storm inside the Philippine area of responsibility. And yes, we are going to announce it, and it is forecast to move towards areas that were hit by Super Typhoon Leon last week. So as early as tomorrow, tropical cyclone wind signals could actually already be issued. Let's now get more details from Tropical Storm Marce from Pag-asa's Rhea Torres. Rhea, hi, can you hear me okay? Hi, Rhea.
Yes, good evening po to everyone.
Hi, Rhea. Okay, first and foremost, itong si Bagyong Marce, mukhang tinatahak ang same route that Leon took. Can we expect the same sort of effects from Typhoon Marce?
Sorry, ma'am, I could not hear the question.
Okay, so can you hear me okay now?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Typhoon Marce, at least early forecast tracks show it taking the same kind of path as Typhoon Leon did last week. Are you still seeing the same effects in the same areas that were affected by Leon?
Yes, currently, based on our latest forecast track, Marce will most likely be going through the same track as Bagyong Leon over the past few days, or what happened in the past few days. And based on our current data, the rains will be mostly concentrated near the center of this tropical cyclone. And the winds, or it may reach up to typhoon category this coming or over the next coming days. And also, it's almost the similar scenario where it might reach typhoon category as it affects the northern Luzon area. So we're expecting huge rains, especially over Batanes and extreme northern Luzon parts, and also strong winds due to the effects of the tropical cyclone.
Okay, what I'm going to ask next is, of course, are we going to be expecting Bagyong Marce to bring in a lot of rain bands, a lot of cloud bands rather, just like Tropical Storm Christine did in the early days before it even went close to land, because a lot of areas are still inundated with floodwaters from Christine?
So currently, we are looking at, as compared to Christine po kasi, itong si Bagyong Marce, is ganun kalawakan yung mga kaulapan po na dala nito. Although we are seeing, or based from the satellite images, we are seeing rain bands spanning up until the eastern portions of Bicol region, or affecting parts of Bicol region, and over the next few hours may affect parts of, or the eastern portions of northern and central Luzon area. Although based on our data, we are seeing that it may have the same features as Bagyong Leon, where the rains, or the strong rains, are mostly concentrated near the center of the tropical cyclone. So this is, since we still have around a few days, forecast scenarios may change in the following days. We're still not 100% sure that the rains will be that strong. However, they're basing this on our forecasts data as of the moment, that more on the areas near the tropical cyclone, especially this coming Thursday or Wednesday, rather, will experience more rain. So if we compare this to Bagyong Christine, it will most likely not be a similar scenario. So we are more on looking at rains near the center of the tropical cyclone.
Okay, I guess last question, Rhea. So basically what you're saying is it does not have extensive cloud bands bringing rains very far-reaching and very wide circumference like Bagyong Christine. This is going to be more like Bagyong Leon, where all the rains are centered near the moving eye of the storm. But having said that, which areas would Pag-asa want to be alert, just so we can advance warn everybody who is watching right now? Which provinces would you want, to keep tuning on or tuning in to your broadcasts and to your updates?
So based po sa ating latest na forecast track, by the coming Wednesday or Thursday, or starting Wednesday or Thursday, the probability cone of the tropical cyclone starts becoming larger. So this affects not only areas of extreme northern Luzon, also areas of central Luzon. So ito po yung mga areas na posibleng daanan ng sentro ng bagyo over the next few days. It is highly dependent po sa mga weather systems na posible pong maka-apekto sa magiging pagkilos nito sa mga susunod na araw. So not only areas po ng northern Luzon ang posibleng makaranas po or may experience the strong winds or rains by this coming tropical cyclone Marce. Not only that, we are also expecting that it may further intensify into typhoon category before it completely, or it makes landfall over parts of northern Luzon. So hindi lamang po areas ng northern Luzon, central Luzon may also need to prepare for possible strong winds and rains.
All right, so northern and central Luzon, be on alert. Thank you so much for these early updates from Pag-asa. As Rhea said, things can still change, so we will keep monitoring the situation as it develops. Pag-asa weather specialist joining us tonight, Rhea Torres, over Zoom. Thank you.
Well, while he was doing the rounds in Batangas, President Bongbong Marcos was asked by reporters for his reaction to the Senate hearing on the war on drugs and the revelations by former President Rodrigo Duterte. But he immediately cut them off and said he did not want to talk about it.
I'm not going. I don't want to talk about. I need to talk about what's happened here. At nakita naman ninyo kung gaano kalaki ang naging sira sa infrastructure.
But House Speaker Martin Romualdez, for his part, expressed confidence in the Quad Committee's ongoing investigation into the war on drugs. In his speech at the opening of the regular session of the lower chamber today, Romualdez said they won't yield to pressure.
In this House of the people, we are on the right side of history. And make no mistake, no matter the challenges, no matter the opposition, we will stand our ground. Sa mga nagtatangka, napigilan tayo sa paghanap ng katotohanan at katarungan, isa lamang ang sasabihin ko sa inyo, hindi kayo magtatagumpay sa masamang hangarin ninyo. We will not yield to intimidation or pressure.
Romualdez says they will carry on with the investigation despite criticism of the so-called Young Guns Bloc and are looking to craft laws such as the Anti-Extrajudicial Killing Act and the Anti-Offshore Gaming Operations Act. Now, he did not name anyone and specify where the criticism was coming from, but he did reference a term that went viral recently because of former palace spokesman Harry Roque, kadiliman at kasamaan.
Dahil unti-unti na natin nakikita ang liwanag at katotohanan, asahan natin na lalo pang titindi ang pag-atake sa ating institusyon, subalit hindi tayo matitinag. Hindi tayo papayag na muling bumalik ang panahon ng kadiliman at kasamaan.
One other House committee that's investigating the Dutertes is Good Government, which today urged the Department of Justice to issue a lookout bulletin order against 7 officials under the office of the Vice President. Marin Enriquez has that report.
Ipapahanap natin. Pag na-cite sila for contempt, ipapahanap natin sila.
The House Committee on Good Government has formally asked the Department of Justice to issue a lookout bulletin against 7 officials under the office of the Vice President and Department of Education. These the hearing on confidential funds and were subpoenaed on October 17. It's not clear if they will turn up for the House hearings tomorrow. They are Chief of Staff Zulaika Lopez, Assistant Chief of Staff and Bids and Awards Committee Chair Lemuel Ortonio, Administrative and Financial Services Director Rosalyn Sanchez, Special Disbursing Officers Gina Acosta and Edward Fajarda, Chief Accountant Julieta Villa del Rey, and former Education Assistant Secretary Sunshine Chari Fajarda. While they have no pending cases, the House Committee allegedly got word that some of them have been trying to leave the country. In a letter to Justice Secretary Crispin Boying Remulla, Committee Chair Congressman Joel Chu said the testimonies of the officials are crucial, and if they flee, it could significantly hinder the investigation. The DOJ has yet to respond to the request. Recall that the ongoing House hearing was based off of the Commission on Audit report that found that Vice President Sara Duterte allegedly spent 125 million pesos in confidential funds in just 11 days in 2022. The Commission on Audit has issued a notice of disallowance on 73 million pesos out of the 125 and directed Duterte, along with their staff Acosta and Villa del Rey, to return the amount to the government. In addition, one of the key findings at the last House hearing was that 16 million pesos was used by the OVP to lease 34 safe houses that cost around 91,000 pesos daily. Duterte has long argued that all these efforts to bring up her office's use of confidential funds were just meant to malign her reputation. House Deputy Majority Leader Bong Teves says this is one reason Duterte's trust and performance ratings have been declining.
Pag patuloy ka nagtatago at patuloy mong hindi sinasagot yung mga tanong na dapat mong sagutin, talagang bababa ang rating mo dahil paano ka pagtitiwalahaan ng ating mga kapwa Pilipino kung hindi mo sinasagot yung mga tinatanong sa'yo?
An immigration lookout bulletin instructs the immigration officers to alert authorities should the subjects attempt to leave the country, but it does not prevent the person from leaving. Only the courts can issue a whole departure order. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
We're going to take a short break, but coming up next, amid deep divisions, the United States will be voting for its next president in just a matter of days. We'll talk about this with geopolitical analyst Don McLean-Gill when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
still watching The Big Story here on One News.
AFP Chief General Romeo Browner Jr. is pressing China to pay 60 million pesos in damages that Philippine troops incurred during the June 17 clash at Ayungin or 2nd Thomas Shoal. Brian Castillo has that story.
Philippine Military Chief General Romeo Browner Jr. is calling on China once more to pay 60 million pesos in damages for the incident back in June, when Chinese Coast Guard personnel attacked Filipino troops during a resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal. That June 17 clash is the one that left one Filipino Navy officer with a severed thumb. Browner said that the military has formally filed its demand through the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Wala pang response yung China, but kasama po ito dun sa usapin ng DFA natin at yung mga counterparts natin. We will demand it. We will continue to demand that, no? Because it is our right. Sila yung nagkasala, sila yung nagnakaw ng ating gamit. Dapat ibalik nila. Dapat ibalik nila.
The 60 million pesos will cover expenses for the damaged inflatable boats and equipment, as well as for the 7 rifles the Chinese took. But it doesn't even compensate for the injury of the Navy servicemen. Apart from Seaman First Class Jeffrey Facundo, who lost his thumb, at least 7 other personnel were injured during the clash.
Wala pa ho dun sa 60 million yung damage na that was caused on the person nung ating isang Navy personnel, no, nung naputulan ng daliri.
Browner said all these at the opening of the annual drills of all units of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, known as Ajex-Dagit or AFP Joint Exercises, Dagat, Langit at Lupa. Unlike the Balikatan exercises, only Filipino troops, over 3,000 of them, are joining these drills, coming from the Army, Navy and Air Force, and Special Operations. Some members of the Coast Guard and PNP are also participating. Browner says the objective of this year is to focus on territorial defense.
Ang objective po natin dito sa exercise na ito ay maging dalubhasa yung ating mga sundalo sa territorial defense, no? Kung sakaling may mangyari, dapat alam ng mga reservists natin kung ano yung gagawin nila at paano sila papasok dun sa overall campaign natin sa pagdepensa ng ating bayan.
They will be drilled on things like command posts, field training, and cyber warfare. But what's also interesting this year is that troops are also doing an information warfighter exercise to ensure they streamline communications and to counter what Browner calls fake news from China.
Kung yung narrative ng kalaban ang umiiral, talo ka na dun sa gera na yon, no? Ganyan din nangyayari sa South China Sea at sa West Philippine Sea, di ba? Alam natin yan, na kahit na tayo yung binabangga ng mga Chinese Coast Guard at ng mga Chinese militia, ang lumalabas sa balita kung minsan tayo pa ang bumangga sa kanila, no? Fake news. So we have to counter that and we have to rehearse that in times of war.
The exercises will be held in the areas of the Western and Northern Luzon commands, with some parts also conducted out in the West Philippine Sea.
We will be having island seashore exercises, amphibious counter-landing exercises, and air defense exercises. Kasama dyan yung joint intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance and maritime security exercises.
This 8th iteration of Ajex-Dagit will run until November 15. For News 5, Brian Castillo. We are One News.
In the United States, it is the eve of the presidential campaign that has divided Americans more deeply than ever, and it will be a battle down the wire between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. As we speak, the Democratic and Republican candidates are making their final rounds at a handful of states. On the day before the elections, Harris will be in Pennsylvania to visit working-class areas and to attend a rally thrown by supporters that include Oprah Winfrey and Lady Gaga. Pennsylvania, of course, carries a hefty 19 votes in the Electoral College that could move things along in the race to 270. As for Trump, he will also be swinging by Pennsylvania, plus North Carolina and Michigan, 2 other swing states. Just hours ago, the final opinion poll of the New York Times and Siena College revealed Harris and Trump still neck and neck in the crucial 7 swing states. Harris had marginal leads in Nevada, North Carolina, and Wisconsin, while Trump looks to win in Arizona. It's also an incredibly close race in Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, with very narrow leads noted. Both also say they're confident of a win.
They cheated elections, and you call them on it, and they want to put you in jail. Think about it. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen, but I love it. You know why? Because we've proven something, we've shown something, and we're going to get it fixed, and we got to win this election.
And we will win, because here's what everyone here knows. When you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. And we have an opportunity in this election to finally turn the page on a decade of politics driven by fear and division. We are done with that, and we are exhausted with it.
Let's talk more about the implications of this hotly contested elections. Joining us tonight, we have Don McLean-Gill. He's a Manila-based geopolitical analyst, author, and lecturer at the De La Salle University Department of International Studies, and he's also a non-resident fellow at the Strat-based ADR Institute. Hi, Don. Good to see you again.
Hi, Reg. Thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
It's going to be an interesting conversation. Okay. This has been called a hugely consequential elections in the United States, and I dare say it's not just going to be consequential for Americans, but also for the rest of the world. So here's my first question to you. If I were Chinese President Xi Jinping, who would I want to win? And the second part of that question, if I were President Bongbong Marcos, who would I want to win, and why?
Right, so these are very interesting but very complex and comprehensive questions that require comprehensive answers as well. Well, when we look into this from a geopolitical perspective, that of security and intersecting with geoeconomics, for instance, if you look at China, China would prefer perhaps, a Harris administration, particularly because it is still subject to change. And that is something that they have least experience with. They would rather see perhaps some sort of continuity with that is currently being demonstrated under the Biden administration. And they may have some reservations about the unpredictability of a Trump administration. But on the flip side, you could also say that the Biden administration has in fact been quite robust. Institution building, security arrangement cooperation that has significantly impacted the security calculations of China. However, what we can actually see is that under the Trump administration, in fact, there were more robust policies as well that were largely pushing back against China's expansionist claims, particularly in the West Philippines. So in both scenarios, really, there are negative implications and perhaps some positive implications for Beijing. But of course, it will depend on the nature and the trajectory of structural conditions that would impact the region. And if you look into the Philippines, for instance, I'd like to say that the Philippine-U.S. alliance would remain relevant regardless of who is in charge. But of course, one important thing that we need to look up, of course, would be the nature of how we would deal with the United States, be it a Harris administration or a Trump administration. If we look into a Harris administration, we would see a relatively more continuity in institutional building. But at the same time, there is also that emphasis on the global South issue and addressing the U.S.-China power competition through capacity building. Right? But on the other hand, when we look into the Trump administration, we have to remember that it was under President Trump's administration that the MDT was clarified, the geographic scope encompassing the South China Sea was clarified during the visit of Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State. But of course, you have to look at it based on the transactional nature of Trump as well. This would mean that we would have to do more to ensure that the Philippines stays hot on the radar of the White House, to push for more arranged negotiations that would favor us and not give us a shorter end of the stick. So again, it's a matter of balance.
Well, some people are saying, Don. Sorry, this is Shawn. But some people are saying, don't look to who will win? Because either Trump, either Harris wins. Just what you said, pretty much we can expect continuity. But look at the majority in the U.S. Congress. What are your thoughts on that?
Right, and pleasure to speak with you as well, Shawn. I hope you're doing well. Now, we have to understand that, of course, the Congress remains robust as a major check and balance to the overarching foreign policy institution of the United States. And in fact, it's not just the Congress, what certain American political scientists address and call as the blob, for instance, is the overarching institutional force field that continues to constrain the level of which U.S. foreign policy in particular could radicalize. So to say that, for instance, Harris or Trump would significantly radicalize and revolutionize U.S. foreign policy, I don't think that would be on the table, particularly because of the strength of the existing institutional makeup of U.S. national politics. So we would expect, at least for both potential candidates, to stay within their particular margins without significant radical shifts.
Okay, Don, let's talk about the Filipino Americans. What do you think are some of the possible factors that they will take into account or should take into account when they choose their U.S. president?
Well, right. I mean, there have been several reports that have actually highlighted the significance of Filipino American community in the major swing states or the areas of contestation. Nevada, for instance, right? So this is an opportunity as well for the Filipino American community to enhance their influence within, the trajectory of U.S. national politics. But of course, like many other Asian American communities, there is a challenge here of maintaining a cohesive position towards a particular party, right? So that's the same for other Asian American communities as well. But from the last report that I've seen, I think there's more of that tilt towards the Democratic Party, for instance, among the Filipino American communities there. But of course, there is a lot at stake, particularly when it comes to issues of immigration, issues of socioeconomics. And then when it comes to the socioeconomic issue, I really feel that either president, has not really demonstrated a clear-cut plan on the socioeconomic trends. So in that regard, it's something that we would still have to see how it would slowly unfold. But when it comes to the influence of the Filipino American community, I think that the influence is now becoming more and more enhanced and realized, but it's a matter of mobilizing collective efforts as well to make that influence sort of operational at the national political level.
Harris's plan to raise up the middle class, that's not something that resonates with you? Because you mentioned that neither candidate, as far as you think, have really laid out a clear socioeconomic agenda.
Reg, sorry, could you repeat that again, please?
I meant with Harris, she's talked about, in the debate, she's talked about her plan to raise the middle class. And,
yeah, there's a bit of a static. I couldn't, okay.
Okay,
now it's good. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I was saying that Harris, during the debate, had talked about raising...
I lost you again.
Oh, no.
All right. Yeah, let's try one more time.
Let's try this one more time. So I was talking about middle class in the U.S. and how Harris had talked about raising the middle class and providing more jobs. And whereas Trump has talked about cutting taxes for the wealthy. So with Harris, with the plan to raise the middle class, that hasn't resonated with you because you mentioned not really the uncertainty over both candidates' agenda, socioeconomic agenda.
Right. Thank you. And yeah, the socioeconomic aspect is still relatively unclear. And well, raising up the middle class is in fact very important such as that in America. And that would be a huge significance. But if we talk about, for instance, Trump's prioritization of tax cuts, for instance, there are several economists that have actually cited the potential that could harm the U.S. economy more in terms of inflation, for instance, and all of that. And we have already seen that sort of unfold in the past few years, for instance, where, well, under the Trump administration, if there would be a Trump 2.0, for instance, there's that idea to bring that back into the national economic plan of the United States. So there are, of course, speculations on whether this would actually do more harm than good for the national economy.
Okay, Don, I heard you use the word geoeconomics earlier, and I know you're a geopolitical analyst, but as we know, these things are often entangled in many, many ways. In terms of, slumping global growth, who would be the better U.S. president to handle all those headwinds and face them head on?
You're forcing him to show his political colors.
No, I mean, not necessarily, but we could look at it based on the level of commitment towards institution building at the economic front, right? So if we talk about global economy, what could channel and provide a positive stimulus for the global economy is to provide more pathways, more options, and more proactive measures that would allow states to actually be able to together reorient and diversify supply chains, ensure economic sovereignty in all these, right? So one issue is that under a Trump presidency, there are concerns whether the level of transactionalism would in fact impact the nature of global economic cooperation, right? And that is something that is concerning, given, of course, that there was this interview on Time magazine, if I'm not mistaken, that Trump said the first thing that he'd do is cut off from the IPF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is one of the important contributions that has still not really formed and has not really matured, but has the potential in stimulating and providing more options to other countries of the Indo-Pacific vis-a-vis the growing asymmetry that these countries have with their relations with China economically, right? And of course, that is something that perhaps Kamala Harris may look into as she is trying to present herself as the voice of the global South.
Right.
For instance, when talk of the U.S. engaging with Africa, it was the vice president that actually went to Africa and engaged with the several countries there, despite the fact that it was President Biden who made the promises, right? So I think we could see that level of inclusivity. But again, it's still too early to tell. And depending, of course, on the overarching structural dynamics that would unfold.
Right. Don, last question. Neither candidate was asked about this on the campaign trail, but what do you think their approach will be when it comes to Taiwan and the persistent question of whether or when China might take Taiwan could very well fall under this next administration. So again, they painted vastly different.
I got the first part of the question, so I guess it's on Taiwan.
Yes. What do you think both candidates will do?
What we could actually think of is that of engagement that, for instance, the current Biden administration has. And while it is significant, there's still a lot of concerns whether that level of ambiguity would be a problem in the long run. Whereas when we look into a Trump administration, there are equal concerns of whether Trump may forego key areas of commitment, such as Taiwan, if, for instance, the U.S. and China would be able to have some sort of robust economic arrangement that would be to the interest of the United States. So these are some of the scenarios that may unfold. Under the Harris administration, more continuity that we are seeing under the Biden administration. So it's engaging with caution, and of course, continuously building on the capacity of Taiwan, for instance. So I think that would remain central under the Harris administration, given that the U.S.-China competition is also within her radius for the Indo-Pacific. But again, the level of transactionalism that Trump has brings out more caution whether it has the capacity to forego certain areas of Taiwan for economic gains, the America First positioning. So these are some scenarios that we could think of, but these are not the exclusive and the only scenarios, and it would have to unfold as we go on with the whoever wins.
Still lots of big questions out there. We're going to have to leave it there for tonight. We thank you so much for your time, geopolitical analyst and lecturer, Don McLean-Gill.
Right, before we go, here is our big picture to kick off the week. And it is the viral motorist that used the EDSA busway with a vehicle bearing a protocol plate number 7. But that's not the issue here. It is what the motorist did after being apprehended last night. The driver of that vehicle, bearing the number 7 protocol plate, which is reserved for senators, fled the apprehending enforcers and reportedly nearly ran over one of them. The enforcers claim that the passenger of the vehicle even flashed a dirty finger at them. Senate President Francis Cheese Escudero has asked the Land Transportation Office to name the owner of the SUV that figured in this incident. However, they haven't actually figured out.
Reminds me of the Chavit episode.
And also the Cheese Escudero episode.
Oh, I don't remember
he had
the Cheese
his own
Escudero one.
Yeah, there was a PBA player among the notable ones. Remember that?
Before he became Senate President.
Before he became,
okay.
yes.
Okay.
Because the Senate, you're right, the Senate President is allowed to use the busway, as well as the Speaker of the House, the Chief Justice, the President, and the Vice President.
Only in the House Speaker as well, right?
The House Speaker
if I'm
too,
not
yes.
mistaken. Yeah.
So
Senator Sherwin Gatchalian has spoken and says the vehicle is not his.
Yes,
Maybe
there was I'll provide the context for that. So I think a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2021, supposedly his dad was seen going around the metro using a white car with a 7 plate. But that was in the previous Congress.
Senator Gatchalian?
Senator Gatchalian's father. So that's where this rumor is coming from, because the car is also white. But the LTO already issued a statement, guys, and they have said that the plate is fake.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't belong to a senator.
It does not.
Okay.
Having said that,
so that's a double offense.
Yeah,
so
it
using
is.
the busway and fake license plate.
And being rude. And almost killing or running over the enforcer. Or not killing, but they really tried to run over, which is what prompted the other enforcer to release the video. Because there were 2 of them at that time.
Got it. Okay,
Maybe
so we might have to, just like the, you remember that episode of the guy who pulled a gun on someone in EDSA? The cop, the ex-cop.
the ex-cop.
I can't remember his name anymore. Maybe we're going to have to name and shame people then.
I think so too. And also, I think all the online sleuths right now, they're all like, Twitter, do your thing, Facebook, do your thing, look for this person.
Because
for the vehicle.
Yeah, but if it's a fake license plate, how do you do that, right?
There was a photo of the guy in the passenger seat, so they have like kind of slowed down that video
so the internet,
You'll be surprised what the
internet
do when they can find.
I know, it's pretty scary. I mean, they're talking about recalling that incident with the ex-cop who pulled a gun on someone. The internet found that too. The internet found his name eventually.
And even our very own PNP, I think they rely heavily on Facebook. So, ingat-ingat sa kung ano pinapost ninyo. Baka bumalik sa inyo.
I don't know what it is about the EDSA busway that people don't get, that you can't traverse. It's not for you unless...
You know what? While we're on the subject, I did notice though a lot of people, a lot of big, expensive SUVs also pulling really the wang-wang moves back on EDSA. Not in the busway, but it's still enough to, cause a panic. Okay. So, I guess that's a lesson here. Again, reminder that only a very select few people are allowed to use the busway.
And also, if you get caught, to not offer rewards, which is what former Governor Chavit Singson did to the authorities. I don't know if they ended up accepting it, but
they
it was
did,
cast in a bad light, right?
They did, but it had to be the MMDA to receive it and not the enforcers themselves.
Okay, that was the big picture, but starting tonight, there is a new show that'll come on right after the big story.
Now, it's for all kinds of sports fans and enthusiasts out there, and it will not only catch you up on the day's biggest sports stories, but it will also give you a play-by-play too.
Okay, let's just do this, guys. Why don't we allow the show's hosts to tell us all about it? We have with us, actually, they're just across us right now, Andre Felix and Cheska Liton. Hello.
Hi, the camera.
Hi, hello.
Cheska Liton Calao, Andre Felix, welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much. Yes, we are so excited because again, later, in just a few minutes actually, we are going to be going on live with the first episode of Play by Play. We are going to be bringing you the latest in sports news.
As she said, I'll just follow her lead. Thank you, Tita Shawn, Madam Reg, and Boss Pawi. Thank you so much.
Why am I madam?
And if you're done with the show, anytime, we're ready. And all the sports fans, stay tuned, buckle up, wear your seatbelts. We're going to have a fun ride. First episode tonight, Play by Play, Cheska Liton Calao, Andre Felix, live on One News.
This is something we can look forward to every night, right?
every
I mean, having our daily sports fix at the end of the day when all the leagues and the games are done. It's nice to catch up on the highlights,
final
the
score.
results.
Yeah. But I also like the fact that it doesn't just catch you up, like you said, on the day's news. It's a play-by-play. I really like the name, actually.
Thank you. And by the way, we'll be having guests tonight. Best import again, the Governor Scott Ronde Hollis Jefferson will be on the show, as well as Coach Jeff Napa with an upset win against UP. Sorry, Pauline.
All right, so that's what you guys can expect and look out for at 9:30 every Monday to Friday. But
Big
from the
guest tonight.
Big guest tonight. Is he here? Okay. All right.
Thanks, girls.
We're going to sign off and leave you guys to Andre and Cheska. That's it from us three at The Big Story tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night. And watch Play by Play.